Somewhere right now, an old dog is lying in a patch of sun, breathing slower than it used to. Its body is winding down, and on some level it can feel that. But here is the question nobody can answer. Does it know what that means? Does it understand that one day soon it simply won't be here anymore? Or is it just tired with no idea that tired is heading somewhere permanent? Because if it does know, that changes everything about what it is like to be an animal. And if it doesn't, then it is dying without ever knowing it is alive. This is one of the oldest questions in biology, and one of the hardest to answer because it sits at the intersection of two things we barely understand: death and consciousness. Let's start with what we actually know. Every animal on Earth avoids death. That part isn't in question. A gazelle sprints from a lion. A mouse freezes when a shadow passes overhead. A fish darts into the reef. The entire living world is built, from the cellular level up, to keep going. Survival is the one instruction written into every strand of DNA on the planet. But avoiding death and understanding death are two completely different things. A moth flies away from a swatting hand not because it comprehends its own mortality, but because a reflex fires faster than thought. The gazelle isn't contemplating the end of its existence. It is running because running is what keeps the machine alive. You can be terrified of a predator without having the faintest idea that death, as a concept, even exists. Fear is old. Understanding is something else entirely. So the real question isn't whether animals fear death. It is whether any of them grasp that death is a thing that happens final, permanent, and coming for them specifically. For a long time, scientists assumed the answer was a flat no. The idea was that understanding mortality required a kind of mental time travel, the ability to imagine a future, place yourself inside it, and then imagine that future ending. That is an enormous cognitive leap, and most researchers doubted animals could make it. Then the evidence started coming in, and it got complicated fast. Start with elephants are where this question gets impossible to ignore. When an elephant dies, the others don't simply move on. They gather around the body, they grow quiet. They touch the dead elephant with their trunks, running them over the face and the tusks, sometimes for hours. They've been documented returning to the bones of a dead family member years later, standing in silence, touching the remains again. They treat elephant bones differently from any other object in their environment. They'll ignore a piece of wood or the skull of a buffalo. But the bones of their own kind stop them cold. Cynthia Moss, who has studied wild elephants for over 4 decades, has watched this behavior again and again. The elephants aren't looking for food. There is nothing practical happening. Whatever is going on, it looks unmistakably like recognition, of loss, of absence, of something that was here and now isn't. That is metacognition brushing up against mortality. And it doesn't stop at elephants. Chimpanzees do something similar. In 2010, researchers documented a group of chimps in a safari park responding to the death of an elderly female named Pansy. In her final hours, the others groomed her constantly. They grew calm and subdued. When she stopped breathing, they inspected her body, gently shaking her as if testing for a response. One of her sons stayed by the corpse through the night, and for days afterward, the group avoided the spot where she had died, moving around it in silence. Their behavior changed, something in their world had shifted, and they knew it. Then there is the story that is hardest to explain away. In 2018, a killer whale named Tahlequah gave birth, and her calf died within the hour. For 17 days, Tahlequah carried the dead body on her head, pushing it through the water across more than 1,000 miles of open ocean. When it slipped off, she dove down and retrieved it. When she got tired, other members of her pod took turns helping her bear the weight. Marine biologists called it a tour of grief, the longest ever recorded in any non-human species. There was no survival value in it. Carrying a dead calf for 2.5 weeks costs enormous energy and slows the entire pod. Evolution should have shut that behavior down millions of years ago. Except it didn't. And the only explanation that fits is the uncomfortable one. On some level, Tahlequah knew her calf was gone. She understood that something that had existed no longer did, and she couldn't let go. But here is where science slams into a wall. Because everything I've just described is behavior. We can watch what animals do. We can document the grief, the returning to bones, the quiet vigils. What we cannot do is climb inside an animal's mind and find out whether it holds the concept we hold, the specific terrible knowledge that I am going to die. There is a crucial distinction hiding in here. Recognizing that another animal is dead is one thing. Understanding that you yourself will one day die is something else entirely, and far rarer. The first is about the world. The second requires turning that knowledge inward onto your own existence. Humans do it constantly, often without meaning to. It shapes our religions, our art, our anxieties at 3 in the morning. The question is whether any animal has ever felt even a flicker of that. Some researchers think the honest answer is that a few of them might. The philosopher and biologist studying this even have a name for the field now: comparative thanatology, the study of how animals respond to death. And what keeps surfacing is a pattern. The animals that show these behaviors, elephants, chimps, whales, dolphins, are the same animals that pass mirror tests, that recognize individuals across decades, that seem to carry the richest inner lives on the planet. It is not random. Awareness of death, if it exists in the animal kingdom, appears to travel with everything else we associate with a complex mind. But there's a strong counterargument, and it deserves to be heard. Maybe none of this is what it looks like. Maybe the elephant touching the bones is just responding to a lingering scent. Maybe Tahlequah wasn't grieving in any way we'd recognize. Maybe she was running a broken maternal program, an instinct to carry a calf that simply didn't switch off when the calf died. We are exceptionally good at reading human feeling into animal behavior. We see a still, quiet animal beside a dead one, and we fill the silence with our own grief. The animal may be experiencing something entirely different, or close to nothing at all. Nobody can prove which reading is right. That is the frustrating, fascinating truth at the center of this. The behavior is real and documented. What it feels like from the inside is sealed off from us completely. And yet the pattern keeps pressing on that door. Because if it were purely instinct, purely scent, purely a broken program, you'd expect it scattered randomly across the animal kingdom. You wouldn't expect it to cluster so precisely in the species with the biggest brains, the longest memories, and the deepest social bonds. The fact that death awareness seems to show up exactly where you'd predict rich inner experience to exist, that is not proof. But it is a very strange coincidence. So where does that leave the old dog in the patch of sun? Maybe it feels nothing but tiredness, blissfully unaware, spared the one burden that weighs on every human being from childhood on. Maybe that is the gift of being an animal, to live entirely inside the present, with no shadow of an ending falling across it. Or maybe, on some dim level we'll never be able to reach, it knows. Maybe it feels its body slowing and understands, in whatever way a dog can understand, that the sunlight won't always be there, and neither will it. We spent centuries assuming animals couldn't possibly grasp something so profound. And every year, the evidence quietly narrows the gap between what we thought was ours alone and what might belong to them too. We may never know for certain what that dog knows, but it is lying there in the warmth, breathing slow, and whatever it understands or doesn't, it is here right now, fully alive in a way most of us forget how to be. And maybe that is the part worth paying attention to, not whether it knows it is dying, but that for this moment it is still here.